Hello, Abigail. That is what I watched tonight. Recommended by multiple people, so thank you, all of you. Spoiler alert, you know the drill. Explaining the movie and scenes in the movie and the ending of the movie, so don't watch if you haven't seen it and you don't want it spoiled. That's out of the way. Alright, so where do we start? Well, we've got this young girl, Abigail. She's doing a little ballet practice on some stage in an empty theater. Turns out that her dad is wealthy, so maybe he rented it out like solely for her or something. I don't know the story, but anyway, she gets picked up and is driven home. Meanwhile, while this is going on, there is a group of tactical individuals with various skill sets monitoring the situation, who have been hired to kidnap this young girl and hold her for ransom to get money from the father. So there you go. We've got, like, you know, the standard tropes. You got the hacker, you've got the hired muscle, etc., all that kind of stuff. Anyway, the driver. They follow the car to the mansion that this girl lives in, I guess, or whatever. And as soon as the driver leaves, they go in they go in before they get there. That's what it is. And they set up and everything. And then 3 of them are in the girl's room, and the hacker girl disables the security so they can all get in, and disables the cameras and all this stuff. So, I mean, they know what they're doing. Apparently they're being paid, if successful, they're being paid $7 million each. So, yeah, well, obviously I would not kidnap a little girl. If you're already in that line of work, I understand how that would be a significant payoff. So that's the story. Anyway, driver pulls up, drops Abigail off. She goes upstairs to her room, chatting on the phone, whatever. Hangs up. As soon as she does, that's when they spring into action. And they tranquilize her. So they inject something in her so she doesn't struggle or make noise or anything. And they throw her in the car and they drive off to this location to meet the person that hired them, who's a gentleman by the name of Lambert. And basically they put her in this room. They blindfold her, cuffs behind her back, everything. Lambert basically thanks them, says, all of you have been selected by, you know, myself for specific reasons. You're all good at what you do, etc., etc. And yeah, that's the gist of it. He takes their phones because, like, obviously, while they're there, no contact with the outside world, they can be traced, you know, all that stuff. Security precautions, whatever. One of them asks, like, why can't we use our real names? And it's like, okay, dude, obviously, because if one of us gets caught, they'll rat all the others out for their own safety. So we're not using real names. And Lambert's like, okay, I'm going to give you some names. And he goes through, like, the Rat Pack kind of deal. So there's Frank, obviously, who seems to be, like, kind of the leader of the kidnapping group, non-officially. Then you got Dean, who is the gangsta guy who was hired basically as a driver, pretty much. That was his goal, his role. You've got Sammy, who's the hacker girl. Got who else? Peter, who's the hired muscle, essentially. We've got Joey, who is basically assigned to watch and take care of Abigail while in custody until the transfer of money. And then we've got Don Rickles, who was cracking a joke, and so that's why he was given that name, apparently. So, anyway, that's the cast. So, obviously, they're, you know, getting to know each other, essentially, and they, you know, Dean thinks he can read everyone, and he's like, yeah, man, so, and he tells a story about everyone, and they're all completely wrong. And then Joey tends to read people very well, and there she starts naming off facts about these people that are apparently true or close enough to the truth to kind of surprise them. So we learn a bit of backstory. It doesn't really apply much to the story, except Frank then does Joey, and he's like, okay, well, you are a former junkie, and you probably ditched your family, and what are you, on the road to recovery or something? That strikes a nerve with her, whatever, so. But for the most part, everything's relatively calm. They're just chatting. Anyway, she goes and checks on Abigail, who is obviously scared. Like, she was just kidnapped. She doesn't know where she is. She's blindfolded, handcuffed. Abigail says, like, or Joey explains to Abigail the situation, and, you know, I'm here to make sure that no harm comes to you while you're here, and nothing bad's gonna happen to you, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's a simple transaction. She explains the whole thing, like, we're here, your father's gonna give us money, we're gonna exchange you, and you're not gonna be harmed. And the girl's like, the blindfold's kind of tight, can, like, you take it off? And so she puts up her mask, little bandana thing, and then removes the blindfold from the girl. And then the girl's like, my arms are sore, so she uncuffs her and recuffs her so her hands are in front of her instead of behind her. Just like simple comforts, I guess, whatever. Anyway, she seems to be comforting Abigail a little bit, so that's fine. And then before she leaves, she's like, Joey? She turns, yeah. I'm really sorry what's going to happen to all of you. It's like, what? Anyway, yeah, so she leaves and is like, okay, we're kind of sketched out. Like, she just, like, threatened violence or whatever. Like, who's her father? And then Frank remembers these stories of this guy, what was his name? Valdez, I think it was, who, like, or no, they figure out that the girl's father is this Christophe Lazar person or something like that, who's like a big time mafiosa guy and all that. So Frank is perturbed a little bit and he goes in to question the girl, but he doesn't realize the blindfold's off of her. So when he enters, she's looking right at him. He's like, oh fuck. He like covers his face and he's like, did you see my face? Did you see my face? And he's like all up in her face. This little girl's like freaking right out. He's like, I didn't see her face, etc. Anyway, he says, who's your dad? And then it's confirmed that that's who it is. And he's basically like, he leaves and he's like, all right, I'm walking. I'm not getting involved with that friggin' guy. Apparently he has this like henchman named Valdez who like massacres anyone that goes against him, like dismembers them and such. There are reports of an FBI team completely dismembered like 8 guys or whatever watching someone, I don't know. Anyway, so they're thinking, oh shit, is Valdez here or whatever. Anyway, at one point Dean is the first victim. Let's just cut to the chase. He's the first victim. He's sitting on it in the kitchen when Sammy walks up behind him. He's like, Dean, like, what's up? And she puts her hand on him and shakes him or whatever, and his head falls off. So, okay, that's not fun. And so that's when Frank starts thinking about Valdez, and everyone else is thinking, oh shit, because some of them have heard about him and whatnot, and they tell the story or whatever. So one down. So they're freaking out. Don Rickles, as he was named, is not into this either. He wants to leave. He's not about that. But there's a big lock on the door now as he goes to escape, and then everyone's like, "What the? We're locked in here?" But his shaking the door, trying to like get out, break the lock, whatever, ends up triggering a bunch of like blast shield shutter things that like go down over the windows and all that. So they're trapped in this building now. So that's great. They're trapped in a building with someone who may or may not be a dismembering master. Master of death. I don't know what you want to call it. Anyway. So that's really fun. Joey and... I think it's Joey and Rickles go off. They're trying to, like... I don't remember why they split up, but they do anyway. And they kind of bond, and Rickles is like, listen, I don't trust any of these other fuckers. I get a good vibe from you. She's like, yeah, I kind of get a good vibe from you too, so let's like watch each other's back. And they're like, okay. Of course, immediately upon that happening, Rickles gets killed. So he's standing at the end of the hallway, and Joey turns and sees him and walks up to him, and when she sees his face, it's like his neck is torn open, and he's like shaking, like in shock, I guess, still standing. So he dies. So that's great. More madness ensues. He reports it back to the group. Everyone's panicking. They decide, okay, well, what the hell's going on? Anyway, one of them goes again to talk to Abigail or whatever, who she like breaks they're freaking out in the room, and she like crunches her hand and puts it through the cuffs, and before anyone can realize it, she's standing on the bed like doing ballet stuff or whatever, and they're like, what the fuck, how did she get out? And then she turns and is like, rah. Okay, she's a vampire apparently, so that's fun. Yeah, good times. So she's a vampire. They get away from her and they go into, there's like an area of like light or something. I can't remember exactly how they escape, but anyway, they're like trying to process what they just saw, and they're like, okay, like let's talk about vampires, what kills them, etc. And they're like, okay, so we got like garlic, we got holy water, crosses, stakes, sunlight. They can turn into bats, they can do all these things, they can use mind control, they can turn you into a vampire if they bite you, whatever. But they don't know which of these are real and which of them are just mythology, because like vampires don't exist apparently, right? But they do, so they got to figure out what is fact and fiction. So yeah, so essentially Peter goes and starts sharpening some pool cues into stakes, and Sammy goes to the kitchen to find garlic, comes back with a bag, and Frank looks at her like with just complete disappointment and irritation in his voice, like, Sammy, those are fucking onions. She's like, I don't know. Apparently she's like some rich girl who like never cooks for herself. She comes from like a lot of money in her family, so whatever, that's her excuse. But that was a good scene, I enjoyed that. Just the look of like bewilderment in his face, like, how do you not know the difference between an onion and garlic? But anyway, so they confront Abigail again, who's now loose in the house, whatever. They find her, and they decide to attempt to attack. And the garlic has absolutely no effect. She laughs and smacks it out of Sammy's hand and starts punching her and roughing her up, and that's when Peter grabs her. The strongest guy of the group grabs her and is overpowered in time, and she grabs the cross around his neck. It's not hurting her at all, and ends up like stabbing him repeatedly in the chest with this tiny little cross. So it's not lethal, but it's like, okay, so crucifixes don't work. At this point, Frank attempts to stake her, but she counters it and puts a stake through his leg, and he's down, and all that stuff. Oh, right, okay, so when she first turns into a vampire and attacks, Joey like shoots her in the forehead and she goes down. And they're like, okay, I guess that's it. And then she rises again. So okay, so they know that bullets don't kill her, and that's why they're doing all this like other stuff to try to, figure it out. Anyway, they get away long enough because they come up with a plan to like sedate her again. So they say, okay, none of this other stuff really worked, and Frank's like, the stake worked on my leg. It's like, okay. But yeah, so they got to use the sedative on her, so that's the plan. So they do just that. They sedate her and lock her in it's like a little elevator with like a big thick steel rod gate all around it or whatever, so she's like trapped essentially. She like shakes it, can't get out, whatever, and Frank decides to stay with her, and she's obviously trying to bargain with him. At first she says, listen, I'll tell you what, you let me out and I'll let 2 of you live. And Peter's like, which 2? And she's like, it'll be a surprise. And obviously that's not ideal, and she eventually, they're like talking about why that's stupid, they're not going to do it. She's like, okay, I revoke that, that's nothing anymore. Now I'm only going to let 1 live, whoever lets me out. So Peter's like, okay, well, I'm going to let her out then, because like, I'm not fucking dying here, I'm not fighting a vampire. Like, that's ridiculous. Joey says, you go for that lock, I shoot you. He goes for the lock, she shoots him. She warned him, I mean, that's fair, right? She's like, alright, so I'm going to go, let's go get you patched up, give me your gun. He's like, alright, whatever. Peter's pretty chill, he seems like a alright feller for, a kidnapper and all that, but anyway. So they go off. Frank decides to stay with Abigail and watch her and make sure she doesn't escape or anything. And she's trying to barter with him. And she's like, listen, the offer still stands for you. If you let me out, I will let you live. And he's like, yeah, no, that's not happening. I don't believe that for a second. He said, eventually he comes to them and says, okay, tell you what, you tell me how to get out of here, I'll let you go. She's like, no, you let me out, then I tell you how. And he's like, no, it's not working. She's like, all right, fine. She tells him there's a bookshelf or whatever, and there's a book with a certain title on it, and if you pull the book, it'll open a thing that'll allow you to get out or something, and whatever. He's like, all right, and he walks off, and she's like, we had a deal, are you not letting me out? And he laughs. He's like, yeah, the thing about that is not happening. So she's not pissing around anymore. She just showcases her actual strength by smashing the gate down. Okay, well, she was never actually trapped. She was just kind of messing with them. Good times. So that's fun. Oh yeah, there's a scene where, can't remember when in the movie it happens, but it's a good scene where Sammy and they all split up to try to find like the power source of the building while she's in the cage. So yeah, while Frank and her, before all that happens, I believe this is going on. And no, it is after. Okay, so I don't know. Anyway, there's a point in the movie where Sammy like trips into like the swimming pool, the enclosed swimming pool area, and it's filled with like corpses. Turns out these are all people that are going up against her dad or whatever. I forgot another thing. Okay, so back at the very beginning, when Joey was talking to Abigail, she's like, yeah, you made the wrong choice in kidnapping me because my dad doesn't actually care about me. And then she does the whole, I'm sorry for what's going to happen, you guys. Anyway, so it turns out that Abigail has been luring people that have wronged her father to this house and killing them to try to get her dad to like her again, which is like, aw, poor little thing. Her dad like turned her in that house and everything. It's just like, okay, well, that's interesting. Anyway, whatever. Let's get to the next death. So, all that's being said, there's a scene where Joey's, during an attack while Abigail's going crazy, Joey opens a blind, sunlight hits her arm, and her arm like explodes. So confirmed, sunlight works. But as she like scurries back, you can already see the arm slowly reforming. So it's like, okay, that buys us a little bit of time to get out of here at least. And we know sunlight works, so that's good. Alright, so we're getting somewhere now. We know one thing. Anyway, in this whole ordeal or whatever, Sammy ends up getting bit, and she's like, what's gonna happen to me? And she even asks Abigail, like, what's gonna happen? She's like, you might turn, you might not, I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, she goes and like touches sunlight and nothing happens to her. She's like, oh, okay, I guess I'm not gonna turn, so that's good. Just little shits playing mind games on me. Cool beans. All right. So yeah, next death. Let's go right to the next death. So we have Peter and Sammy. Or Sammy is like, okay, so I don't have anything to hack into the system, but if we do find the control room or the power source, we can literally just shut it down, and then all of the stuff will become inactive and we can escape the house. So good plan. They split up. Horrible move no matter what. Like we saw what happened in the last review with Red Riding Hood when they split up, right? People die. That's what happens. But anyway, no different here. So at least they're splitting up into like not alone, which is good. So yeah, we have Peter and Sammy go off in one area and they're exploring the house. And they get into this like dark, was an atrium hallway or something. I don't know what it is, but it's like a dark, decrepit looking hallway. That's the thing about this house too, is like upon their first entering the building, it looks really nice, like fancy and like a rich person's mansion. Well, it's a mansion, it literally is. But like it's all kept up and everything, and the further into the house they go, the more like dilapidated and unkempt it is, which is neat. So that's fun. Anyway, they go down this atrium and they have like an actual like bonding moment where, Peter's like, all right, like we're gonna be good. Don't panic. I've got your back. let's just find what we gotta find. They both have like weapons and whatever too, but unfortunately for Peter, that's when Sammy does change. So she vamps out and is basically Abigail's like thrall. So what that is essentially is like completely under her control. So that's fun. Yeah, and she attacks Peter, catches him off guard. He doesn't realize she's turned. It's the end of that. Anyway, she uses this moment of her first kill to go over the radio and say, "I found Abigail, like come quick," and everyone like rushes down. So she lures them in essentially, and she hears them coming. She quickly kneels down by Peter, and her acting skills are absolutely terrible because Joey catches on right away, like she's turned. She's turned. Yeah. So that it's revealed she attacks. Blah 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 blah. They end up getting pretty roughed up, but they do defeat her, and I can't remember if it's via sunlight or a stake. I want to say it's a stake because yeah, it is. Yeah, so they stake her, and then like her whole body explodes. So stakes work, sunlight works. Garlic does not work. Crucifixes do not work. They don't have any holy water, but they know two things that will work. So at this point, it's the day again. So they're like, okay, well, as long as we're by windows, she can't do shit against us, this Abigail girl, because we saw what it did to Sammy. So good times. So the only people now that are left are Frank and Joey. Yeah, I guess so, because we already went through all the other ones, right? Did I miss anyone? Yeah, no, that's it. Okay, so it's them. They're in the library room or whatever, which has the biggest beam of sunlight in it or whatever for protection, and that's when one of the shelves opens. And they're like, okay, this is clearly a trap, but what the fuck else do they have to do, right? So they go down this little corridor that leads into the main security room, and in that security room is Lambert, the guy who had initially hired them all, who tells them basically he works for Abigail, but he's tired of her shit. He's a vampire too, by the way. But he wants to essentially, he called the father, and the father's coming, and his plan is like, listen, I'll turn you, Frank, because he knows more about Frank than anyone else apparently. I'll turn you. We'll take them both down, take over their entire empire. He had smacked Joey to the ground at this point, so she's like kind of out of it. Anyway, at this point, Frank is just like, you know what? Fuck it, bite me. So he does. Bites Frank, feeds him his own blood. Frank turns violently by like spewing blood up, and then yeah, he's a vampire. So that's fun. And Lambert's like, okay, well, Frank, let's get this going here. And he turns to Joey. He's like, I present you your first victim. Which Frank does not react in the way that Lambert had anticipated, because you see a stake go through Lambert, which was by Frank, care of Frank, thank you, and Lambert explodes. But it's not as fun as you know you might think it is, because he still wants to kill Joey. Joey runs, she goes down a corridor, and she has this moment where she's like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna die. So, I mean, my estranged son, I'm gonna call him, and calls him, and he answers, but it's just like a fake, like, haha, gotcha message, you know, those stupid things. She leaves a message basically telling him like that she loves him, she always has loved him, and she wishes, you know, all things were good and everything and whatever. Anyway, Frank shows up as she hangs up. At least she got to tell him she loved him one more time, you know, that's good. Frank pummels the hell out of her. He doesn't just like kill her, he bites her, he throws her around, he throws her off of railings into the middle of the floor. Yeah, but as she's falling off the railing, about to like smash her head on the ground from like the second story or whatever, Abigail rushes in and like captures him. Fuck, I missed another thing. Okay, so right after Lambert was killed by Frank, I'm so sorry, you guys. Right after Lambert was killed by Frank, Abigail comes in and she's like, okay, so cool. I see you found Lambert. enjoy. We're gonna, he could be a vampire. It's good times. He turns on her. He's a full-grown man. He's not as old of a vampire, because apparently Abigail was like centuries old. She just was turned when she was a little girl, so she's in that body. But the physicality of a full-grown man versus a little girl, even in vampire form, it scales apparently. So he overpowers her, bites her, she falls down. Don't think she's dead at this point, or at least I didn't think she was dead, but she's out of the picture for now, and that's when the scene is and runs. Anyway, skip forward again. He shoves her off the railing, and she's about to fall essentially to her death, and Abigail runs out and catches her and is like, listen, I'm not strong enough to kill him on my own. He wants to kill both of us. Give me a hand. She's like, aight. I'm going to take my chances with this little girl that I may have slightly bonded with at the very beginning. I mean, chances of survival aren't very good, but they're better with Abigail and with Frank, right? So she agrees. Frank overpowers both of them, so that's fun. He bites Abigail again, and he like impales Joey to the wall with like a big metal rod, and then it turns to Abigail, bites her. She's down for the count for now. It looks like it's over essentially. Anyway, he ends up getting toasted. So Abigail comes to, and their combined efforts. He like pulls Joey off of like the impalement for whatever reason. I don't know why. But Abigail and her combined take him. Stake, boom, blood everywhere. Oh fuck, the dad's here. Dad's not happy. He's not happy in the least. This is a terrible review. I'm so sorry. It's so much better than how I'm saying it is. But I've come this far. I'm already like 27 minutes into it, so I'm just going to keep going. Anyway, the dad comes in, this Christophe Lazar or whatever, the big head honcho whose daughter this vampire is. And he's going to kill Joey, essentially. And Abigail actually stands up for her and is like, no, you don't understand. She's like, she helped me. Like, literally, I'm alive because of her, essentially. Yeah, she was here when you weren't. And he's like, I'm here when you needed me. And there's kind of like a mutual understanding. And Lazar is like, okay. He turns to Joey. He's like, listen, leave right now because it's almost dinner time. So he gives her enough time to like get out and whatever. And she drives off, and daddy and daughter are happy together and all that stuff. And yes, I realize how awful this telling of the events of this movie are, and I'm very sorry. But you know what? I'm going for the whole raw, just saw it, no script thing, so I'm going to post it and roll with it. So you know what? This might be my least enjoyed review yet, but I don't care. It's real and it's raw. Anyway. Movie, so much better than what I explained. Thoroughly enjoyed this one. I'm going to go ahead and give it like a 9.1. It was really good. If even any of this like review and like spoiler thing and like overview of the film story is interesting to you in the slightest, I can assure you it's like 1,000 times better than what I'm explaining it. So I do highly recommend watching this movie. I watched it on Prime. I think it's available on a couple of different streaming services if you don't have Prime, but 100% you should watch it. Yeah, the acting was solid. The characters were neat. The deaths were pretty decent. I guess you can't really call them twists because if you know about this movie at all, that Abigail's a vampire. So, I mean, that's whatever. But the reveal is good. And, like, the reactions are good. And the whole thing is just solid. The music is good. Cinematography is solid. Just go watch it. It's good. You will not regret it. I'm already almost 30 minutes now, so I'm going to end it here. 9.1, Abigail. Go see it on Amazon Prime. Okay, bye.